Alrighty everyone, I'm back onto the B model now after a few days away from it. So I set the valve clearances on it. So just on this old rocket here, 16 and 24. And yeah, just had a bit of a look inside. It looks okay. So just like you've seen on previous videos, replaced some hoses there, hooked up the stopper cable, put a tacho drive in it. I'm just waiting for a cable, and just generally tried to tidy that area up there. So I'm just about ready to start it. So what I've done, I was able to take the big hose off the starter motor and put some diesel down it, just because it hasn't been started for a fair while. Just because it's an air starter, it helps lubricate the veins in there. So I've replaced a section of hose there, and I'm waiting for that intake hose. That's not easy to find, the correct stuff. So yeah, just need a fitting now to hook up to the air start tank, and we should be right to go. I think I've got one filed over here somewhere. It's just a double nitto, male. Should do the trick. Worst thing about these air starts is you don't get a very long crack at the starter, so just put this down for a sec. So that'll pump that up, and yeah, we'll get around inside, wait for it to build up air. I've got all the spouts on the top of the injector pump are loose. All of these are loose, so we've still got pressure on there, good pressure. I've checked the water, put water in it, and checked the oil, it's okay. So as soon as we've got a little bit of air up, we'll be right to try and give it a start. Yeah, it's a bit of a rough old diamond, but it'll clean up okay. Be a good project for someone. So on this one, that's your start lever there that presses downward onto a valve that's in between the tank and the starter motor. So generally speaking, they're fairly effective. So yeah, what we'll have to do is spin it over, and that will, probably take a couple of goes, but we'll start getting fuel out the top here. Then we'll have to lock them up with a 3/4 spanner, which I've prepared earlier. So hopefully we get a little bit of fuel out of there, and then yeah, we'll just see how quickly it wants to fire up after that. It was a very slow starter initially, and hence that's why I've done some of the work to it. This housing here I mentioned in an earlier video was broken. This is actually the old one here. Where are we? See the brake on there? So that was just pouring oil out of that and making a hell of a mess. Yeah, so another housing on there, just reset the timing. As I mentioned earlier, I replaced that valve, and I've got good pressure inside that pump now. I cleaned up the seats on this lift pump and put a new hand primer on there. All of those things, coupled with the air pressure regulator in the top of the fuel tank, helped to get fuel pressure up and keep fuel pressure there. So yeah, in a perfect world, we'll wind this over a couple of times, get fuel out of all of these, lock them up with a spanner, and yeah, then we could probably, it might go after that, but we might also have to crack the injectors as well, just to bleed out any air, just to give it every possible chance of starting. Like I say, it hasn't fired a shot for a fair while. No doubt we'll get plenty of smoke out of there, and but anyway, hopefully hopefully it fires up a little bit better than what it did before. We'll get a little bit of air into this thing, and it's a fairly early B model, this one, for Australia. Our trucks out here had B61 RT or RS, R being right hand drive, after about 1963. So this is about a 60 or a 61 from what I can remember. Yeah, I've done a little bit of work to it on and off. I just mounted that secondary plate down there with the air valves on it, just because it didn't really have any maxi brakes at all on it. Tried to, just keep it a bit original looking. I used a couple of old valve buttons on the push-pull valves, and yeah, so I've got just a little bit of floor mat material to put into it once we get this engine running properly, and it has had pretty well new air lines and valves put into it. I put another air tank into it there because it had just a bodgy metric style tank which didn't fit very well. So in that I've incorporated, that's got a wet tank up the front of it, and then a main reservoir in the rear. And up the back of this, it had a little tank up here which I've used for a reserve air system. So I've set it up as you'd probably see a Mack from the early 70s. So it's got maxi brakes which I've fitted as well. It's yeah, what is it? It's a single system with an emergency release. That's what the reserve air tank is. So yeah, before it just wasn't stopping at all. It wouldn't build up air. It was a real bugger of a thing. So anyway, this should be all right anyway. I'll just do a few more jobs to it, and then the customer can decide what he wants to do with it. Anyway, I thought the thing might have built up some air by now, but we're not quite there. So yeah, I cleaned up these lids the other day, and yeah, just saw these old badges on them. They're pretty cool. You don't see too many like that anymore. So yeah, so it's not the original engine for the truck. It's a 673E, which didn't come out until about 69 or 70. Yeah, this truck would have had a P motor to begin with, just a 673P, but an E motor is basically the same. They use the same pistons and liners in them, and yeah, they were just a little bit later. Probably had a little bit later style fuel pump on them. So the compressors just build up air now. So I'll shoehorn myself in here. It's got the quad box there. The ratio. Obviously, we're not going to drive too far today. So see if she wants to get some fuel out of those spouts. So down on the lever there. Rightio, so I can smell a bit of fuel there, so hopefully have a bit of a look here, and yeah, so we've got a bit of fuel out of a couple of spouts there, so we'll lock a couple up. We might even just wait another go, and actually they're not even bloody loose, those buggers. It's a bit stupid. So we'll give it another blast on the air starter once it builds up air again. Yeah, so we've got fuel out of 4 of those there, and you can see how it's splashed up under the manifold. So it is coming out there with reasonable pressure. Give it another prime. We've still got good pressure on that hand primer. So once this air's built up, we'll give it another squirt there, and we should get it out of these front two. Then we can lock them up and see what it wants to do after that. Regardless of what condition your engine's in, if you're trying to bleed one of these from scratch, generally speaking, you could go through 6 or 7 tanks of air If you've got something that's completely dry, where there's no fuel in the injectors, the lines, nothing like that, you know, you can be, with an air starter, you can take a fair while to get them going. If you've just removed a fuel pump or something like that, and there's still fuel in the injectors and the lines, well, it might not take you as long. But it's one of those jobs that you don't want to rush it. You don't want to be in a hurry to do it. You've just got to take your time and work through it. It is best if you can get fuel out of all of them. Then that way you know you've got good pressure down this end of it, and then yeah, we can crack a couple of injectors around that other side, or we can just see if it wants to start. And but anyway, the air starter seemed to spin over pretty well. No doubt it's probably made a bit of a mess under there, just where it squirted some of the diesel out. But you know, the later model Macks with the air starters had a diesel feed with a lubricator valve in the end of them, so every time you hit the key, they just put a little bit of diesel from your return line into that starter, and it was self-lubricating as such. But yeah, these things here, quite often they used to have a little hose going to the front of the starter motor with a cap up near where your bonnet opens on the other side there, and you used to take the cap off and, you know, dribble a little bit of diesel down there every now and then. So it is periodic maintenance to do that. Your vanes in your starter motor will stick and get gummed up, and it will obviously wears everything out, but it slows the starter motor down too. So if you've got an engine, particularly if you're in cold conditions, or if it's a bit down on its luck, a bit worn out, then you know, the faster you can get that engine to spin over on the starter motor, the better off you're going to be, and the easier it is to start the thing. So anyway, in saying all of that, this thing is still a bit of an unknown, so we don't really know if it's going to fire up yet. Your guess is as good as mine. But anyway, it's just built up air there again now. The compressor's cut out, so when we come back, I'll just be watching for fuel on those couple of front spouts. We'll give it another good spin over and see what she wants to do. I'll get into it. On the lever again, just press downwards on that. Yeah, so we've got good fuel out of them now. So we'll wind them down, and it might fire up, it might not. I'll probably try it once without it and see what it wants to do. It might kick, and so another thing that I didn't tell you before, whenever you start one of these old Mack engines after a period of time, one thing you've got to check is to make sure the rack and the fuel pump isn't stuck, because generally they'll stick at full noise. Because what happens in these pumps, they're always set on the full fuel position, and the reason for that is it gives you maximum fuel on start, and then as the engine starts to spin, the weights in the governor throw outwards with centrifugal force, and then that pulls the rack back to an idle position. So what happens when it sticks, like I say, because normally it'll stick when it's been sitting for a period of time, turned off. So in theory, the rack will be in full fuel position, even with the engine switched off. And what would normally happen when you start it, obviously, like I just said, as the governor weights throw out, and it gradually pulls the rack back, that won't happen. The rack will just stick there. So it's pretty important to have a look at that. The best way is on your stopper. That's the easiest way there. You can't quite see it there, but on that stopper lever, with the cable disconnected, you want to be able to pull that back. Obviously, when you pull the stopper in the cab, that pulls that lever backwards, but you'll pull it backwards and you'll hear the rack slapping backwards, and that's what you want to hear. You want a really good sort of positive sound about it. If you're not getting any sort of sound about it there, then there's a good chance it's stuck. And yeah, that means it'll start up on full fuel like normal, but then it'll stay there. The governor won't be able to pull it back if the rack's stuck, and the rack will normally just stick just from old diesel. So your rack goes right the way along the pump there, and that's where it is there. And on the later model trucks where you've got a pollution control piston on there or a puff limiter, that works on the rack. So your rack will actually, when you take the pump off and take this housing off, your rack will be exposed by about an inch or so. And with that governor cover there, you can take that off and you can work the rack back and forwards. But that's something I'll show you on another video. I do have an engine here with a stuck fuel pump, so that'll probably be a good video in itself. But this one here, this was okay. I did check it before. So at the moment, I haven't cracked any of these injectors here. So we'll just give it a go at that. So we've built up full air again. We've locked up all the fuel outlet spouts. It might want to kick this time, but it also might not, so I'm not getting too excited about it. But anyway. How good's that? Well, that's the best this thing started in about 20 years already. Well, I've got good oil pressure there. Well, I'm really happy with that. It's a very good result. It puts some of my theories, proves some of my theories, which I'm quite happy about. So just try and let it idle on its own there. Might have to bump that up slightly, but. She might just idle there by itself for a little bit. Well, I reckon that's a pretty good result. So I reckon the pump timing must be really good now. We've primed up that fuel and got fuel pressure everywhere where it should be. And yeah, and it fired up basically as soon as we locked up the spouts on the top of the fuel pump. So I reckon that's a great result. And yeah, we're just starting to get a bit of a shower of rain here now, so I'll leave you to it. And I'll have more updates for you later on. Yeah, thank you everyone.